Greetings, stranger. You're just in time. Our river tour of Almas is about to begin. Come join me on the deck and let's dive in. No, not literally. The Andoshen's waters are fouled here from the pollution of the city. I would advise avoiding contact with the river until we are much farther north. No, I simply meant metaphorically diving into the districts and buildings of Almas, it being one of the largest and most important ports in the inner sea. Never mind it also being the capital of Andoran. So, are you ready? Then let's begin. Geography first, I think. As I mentioned in my introduction to the tour, Almas is divided into 5 distinct areas, separated by the confluence of the Tamuth, Kernite, Moulton, and Andoshen rivers. Broadly, however, it is best to think of the city as being split into a united eastern half and a fractured western half. The splendor of democracy is undeniably more polished in the former than in the latter, as it alone houses the palaces and temples worthy of a flourishing capital. The western half of the city instead houses most of its economic productivity, particularly smithing and lumber processing, which even here on the coast is a vital source of employment. The city is surrounded by strong walls, and so each half also hosts one of the 2 official entrances in the Iron and God's Gates, though almost all traffic actually arrives by river or sea. Unlike the autonomous, ordered administration of Absalom, Almas district boundaries are somewhat blurred. The entire city is overseen by a single mayor, who also doubles as the supreme elect, and Almas is formally considered a single municipality. This means the recognized districts are more traditional than anything else, but they still serve as a good starting point to orient yourself with a local. There are 5 primary districts and 7 secondary districts attached to them. All the land coming up on our left to the west is part of the Tamuth district, named after the river that marks its border. Northwards is the aptly named North End, which is the largest by far, claiming all the land north of the Tamuth in the west and north of the Field of Concord in the east. On our right is Portside, home to the largest piers and rowdiest sailors. In truth, there is hardly any part of Almas's 4 rivers that has been left wanting for more piers, but Portside is special for being the only part of the city accessible for those vessels too large even for the generously arched bridges running along those rivers. Thus, Portside is where most foreign trading occurs, and should be your first stop if you are seeking the rarest goods. Looking in that same direction, you can see that prominent hill there to the east, jutting up above the rest of the city. Well, that is its 4th district, and it is creatively called East Hill. Most of the city's residents live there, and much like East Gate in Absalom, it is quiet during the working day and positively overflowing with commuters at dawn and dusk. Finally, everything north of East Hill, up to and including the Field of Concord, is the Liberty District, the true heart of Almas. There you will find the government, the parliament, the Eagle Knights headquarters, everyone who is anyone important to the running of Almas and Andoran. You'll have a much better view soon, don't worry. For now, let's turn our heads westwards to see our first location. This small outcropping of rock, barely worthy of the island label. In fact, it is so small that I'm not sure the island itself actually has a name. It is known only for its lighthouse, whose ever-burning flame ensures safe passage for all ships entering the harbour. Benedict's Hope. Do you see the statue at the base there? Weathered but steadfast. It is wrought in brass and evokes a rather concerned-looking woman putting quill to parchment. This is Alsande Benedict, a political essayist revered at least as much as Dal Yubanich, not least for being a native Andoran. She wrote pamphlets her whole life, mostly extolling the virtues of hard work, but during the People's Revolt she instead cautioned strongly against needless violence. Her work was widely disseminated alongside Yubanich's On Government, and she is credited with bringing the tempering voice of reason to the passions of the revolution. After her death in 4690, her diaries and essays were compiled and published together in a volume called Tales of Lady Liberty, a title she has posthumously held ever since. By the way, don't mistake her works for pacifism. She knew how to fight for the cause, and would often disguise herself as a male soldier by the name of Captain Hawk, and lead daring raids against the Andoran Old Guard, most notably securing their naval ships at Augustana before they could be seized or scuttled. Indeed, she would lose a leg to the violence of the People's Revolt. Nevertheless, her writings were instrumental in ensuring that the reckless bloodshed of Galt's Red Revolution did not import itself into Andoran. Just beyond Benedict's Hope lies the Tameth district's first ward, called Mugget. If you are vegetarian, or simply wish to avoid the smell of butchery, then I would avoid it at all costs. Mugget is the heart of Almas's meat industry, and the cobblestones there are always slick with gore and excess offal. The shops at the edge of the district offer the best cuts, but the farther into the maze-like street network you travel, the cheaper the meat becomes. The smell is rivaled only by the tanning industries, which is flourishing there too. Black plumes of smoke rise day and night from the warehouses of its heart, and the alkaline fumes make for a caustic olfactory experience. There is really nothing in Mugget for a tourist to witness. Mugget is bordered to the west by Balmore's Canal, a siphon of the Tameth River designed to facilitate merchant cargo. Unfortunately, not many merchants volunteer themselves to use it because the canal water is so thoroughly befouled by animal and industrial waste that people fear to purchase anything that has been in close proximity to it. Frankly, the canal has been a source of embarrassment and shame for the people of Almas for years, and I'm amazed nothing has been done about it. On the other side of Balmore's Canal is the ward known as Smithtown, where the sound of hammers ringing against anvils can be heard long past sunset. If Mugget assaults your nose, Smithtown assaults your ears. Smithtown has a sizable dwarf population, of course, and the Longbeards' reputation as master smiths is well earned. The fierce competition between the forges keeps prices low compared to other parts of the world, and more or less any metallurgic project you could envision can be commissioned in its narrow lanes. That said, most of the smiths do not serve adventurers unless they are interested in purchasing farming or shipbuilding equipment. The final ward of the Tameth district is known as Bellows, and it is half residential and half industrial, as most of the dwarves choose to live close to their forges. In contrast to the important but ultimately crude work of their blacksmith companions, the whitesmiths and gem cutters of Bellows are renowned for their precision and skillful craft. Almost all of them are descendants of refugees from the volcanic catastrophe remembered as the Rending, during which Droskar's Crag erupted in the Five Kings mountain range on Andoran's northern border, dooming the dwarven empire of Tal Hadum, which had called it home. The Rending occurred in 3980, but even now, over 700 years later, the dwarves of Almas remember it in bitterness and despair. Bellows has wide streets compared to its companion wards, and so one of the city's two great gates is also found here. It is called the Iron and Hoof Gate on account of its sturdiness and the disproportionate animal traffic it receives in the daylight hours. Locals tend to shorten its name to just the Iron Gate in casual conversation though, so do not be confused if you hear reference to that. The original capital of Andoran, back when it was only a province of Taldor, Augustana, lies along the road westwards that runs from the Iron and Hoof Gate. I do not think I will be travelling that way for some time, but should you feel the need to visit, there lies your starting point. Now then, let us turn our heads eastwards to behold Portside, a harbour worthy of Absalom itself. Well, almost. But in any case, there is only a single location of note to be found there, if you are not seeking a tavern serving wretched grog, or a captain within one to spirit you away across the inner sea. You cannot see it from here, but if the wind changes, the sailors claim you can hear it. I speak of the Grand Exchange, a union of warehouses, markets, currency exchanges, and special interest offices. They say it hustles by day and bustles by night, as proud dignitaries and furtive foreign agents mingle in sight of merchants hawking goods and services in equal measure. You can never be certain what you might encounter in the Grand Exchange, nor can you guarantee what kind of payment might be demanded from you. Information is valued just as much as gold there. For the budding adventurer, it is the ideal starting point if you are in need of an especially unusual assignment. Such employment is just as likely to send you to the depths of the Mwangi Expanse as it is to Mugget across the water. But keep your wits about you, and you should feel right at home. As we pass under the second long bridge, take note of the road that anchors it on the eastern bank. It marks the beginning of the East Hill district, and following it will lead you in good time to a wide and well-maintained road called the Avenue of the Gods. A dozen large temples dedicated to the best-known deities in the Inner Sea flank both sides of this road, and even those dedicated to less savoury gods are honoured. Religion holds an interesting place in the hearts of Andorans, for the freedom to worship is a fundamental right in its founding Associative Act. Almost all Andorans attend the churches of either Arbadar, Iomade, Shailene, Caden Kalian, or Erestiel, and many refer to religion as one of the three pillars of a strong community alongside family and honest work. Simultaneously, though, Andorans are all too familiar with the dangers of worshipping malevolent deities, and winning their liberty from infernal chiliacs has led to much suspicion being cast onto those who worship Asmodeus, Norgaba, or another dark god. Consequently, while no religion is illegal, at least officially, the government and people keep a very close eye on those few temples that are consecrated in the names of deities who dwell in the pit, Abaddon, or the Abyss, and publicly acknowledging faith in such gods will see you quickly ostracized by your neighbors. Contrast this to Absalom, where certain religions are prescribed, but those that are permitted, such as 3 of Norgaba's 4 aspects, are treated as true equals. Thus, I would conclude that Andoran's approach to religion is de jure more welcoming than Absalom's, but de facto less welcoming. And that brings us back to the Avenue of the Gods. The temples here are the pride and joy of Almas's religious, and the first thing a visitor sees when entering the city from the east through the enormous God's Gate. Smaller shrines capture many lesser-known deities and demigods too. Ever since Andoran's independence, the God's Gate has not once been closed as a symbol of liberty, and the locals are very proud of it. The grandest temple on the avenue, twin spires dominating that part of the skyline, is dedicated to the god Eredon, having been built long before his death in 4606. Few Andorans light candles in his name any longer, and thus nobody really objected when the long and influential arm of the Pathfinder Society reached out and claimed the site for itself. Thus, the Temple of Eredon on the Avenue of the Gods has been renamed to the Almas Lodge, and the twin spires have become a welcome sight for the Society's adventuring agents throughout the land. As well as a place of law and rest for its members, the Almas Lodge is also renowned among alchemists for its remarkably advanced homunculus laboratory. I recall a scholar there who published a remarkable treatise on the ethics of golomancy, homunculus synthesis, and other constructive practices, but I will spare you the boring details. They are recorded in the Encyclopaedia Galarianensis if you really want to know. Ah, at last. Now take a good look at this, which puts all else in the city to shame. Behold the field of Concord. Here is the centre of politics and culture in the Liberty District, and indeed in Almas, nay, Andoran itself. It stretches from the banks of the Andoshen for over a mile eastwards, almost all the way to the city wall, and every inch has been created with passion. The field of Concord is a cobblestone causeway that is lined north and south with impeccably pruned hedges, watered by marble fountains, and frequented monthly by merchants in fine garb peddling artisanal wares. The space is held by the government on the people's behalf, and almost every building that flanks it is run by politicians or civil servants endeavouring to keep Andoran beautiful. There are surely too many to name here, but I will recount the most important 5 for you now. Closest to us, overlooking the Andoshen itself, is the Palace of the People's Council, that is, the Parliament of Andoran. There are 350 representatives who gather here from across the country to debate and pass laws, and each is entitled to maintain an office in one of the palace's top floors. The ground floor, however, is dedicated entirely to a single open amphitheatre that entertains, with sincerity and dignity, more ideas than could ever be realised. Its debates are public, and the holding one is, in the words of Ubanich himself, democracy manifest, a worthy use of your time. Travelling a few hundred yards along the field will bring you to the Archstone Monument. This seemingly random slab of rock is in fact the capstone to the Arch of Eredon that bridges the continents of Aveston and Garund at the Inner Sea's narrowest point where it meets with the wild Arcadian Ocean. Many people do not realize that the Arch of Andoran is not a geographical term, but an engineering one, as it refers to a literal arch that spans the gap between the two continents. It took Cheliax 50 years of manpower and magic to build it thousands of years ago, but its utility has decreased somewhat since the keystone fell into the water below. The aquatic Gilman found it, and eventually brought it here to Almas after Andoran secured its independence from Cheliax, much to the surprise and acclaim of the Andorans, and the indignation of the Chelaxians. It was taken as an almost divine sign of approval from the last Aslanti, despite his being dead, and so it resides here, stoic and proud, as yet another symbol of equality in Andoran. Opposite the Archstone, on the northern edge of the Field of Concord, is the Citadel of the Supreme Elect. The Supreme Elect is the leader of Andoran, and the head of its executive, and as such is one of the most powerful people in the Shining Kingdoms, and in a sea region. For many, many years, this position was held by one of the heroes of the People's Revolt, a man named Codwin of Augustana. He was elected in 4704 for a 4-year term, re-elected in 4708 with increased support, and re-elected again in 4712 with a much smaller majority. The election of 4716, however, proved too much, and he was succeeded the following year by Andoran's current ruler, one Andira Marusek, a former member of the Steel Falcons. Her fiery oration and vigilance against slavers operating within the reach of her nation have been quite inspirational for the people, and this was enough to secure her re-election in 4720. Unless something changes, I dare say she is likely to secure a 3rd term for herself next year, particularly if her increasingly bellicose language flowers into serious conflict with Cheliax. Until then, however, she resides in the Citadel, flanked on all sides by her appointed ministers, collectively called the Demarchy, and a protective legion of her Eagle Knight comrades. But I think the copper dome of the Citadel, impressive as it might be in isolation, is overshadowed by the majesty at the centre of the Field of Concord, which before the People's Revolt was a fortress held in Cheliax's name. That is the Golden Aerie, also known as the Golden Tower, and it is the home of the Eagle Knights. Constructed with enough white marble to be almost blinding when the sun shines directly onto it, the Golden Aerie is so named for the statue of Talamandor on its pinnacle. Talamandor is an Agathion, a celestial being of incredible power who hails from the outer plane called Nirvana. He serves as something of a patron to the Eagle Knights and to Andoran as a whole. He is not worshipped, for he is not himself divine, but he is revered and respected, and Andorans will often invoke his name in lieu of their true deity. The Aerie itself is a fortress, protected by thousands of Eagle Knights and protective wards. Their supreme commander, General Reginald Cormoth, is a respected paladin of Iomade with the title Lord of the Golden Tower. Now in his late 80s, it is not clear who will replace him in the coming years, and his passing will mark a strategic dilemma for Andoran. You see, his personal friendship with the leader of Nirmathus, Forest Marshal Wesleyan Gavirk, has put both nations into a covert alliance, one that may not be continued with the old man's death. But you did not hear that from me. Finally, on the east end of the Field of Concord, we have the Golden Cathedral. Its design is conspicuously similar to the Almas Lodge's because, in days gone by, it served as a second, even grander cathedral to Andoran for Andorans. Its splendour is truly without equal. Today, it has been claimed by the government and converted into the largest public library in Andoran, open at all hours of the day and night, and freely accessible to all citizens. Indeed, the government encourages the literate to read the seminal texts that inspired the People's Revolt, and holds frequent public lectures there on the same common virtues for those who have not learned their letters. The Golden Cathedral is considered one of the great repositories of lore in the Inner Sea, and as such, it holds a special place in my heart. Now, as I mentioned before, everything north of the Field of Concord is considered to be part of North End. However, this district is split into roughly 4 wards. Most of the land directly north is the Embassy District, and it is easily located by the imposing stone walls that delineate its streets from those of the University District. and it houses many ambassadors and dignitaries of other nations. Andoran prohibits slavery even on embassy grounds, much to the consternation of many nations, but otherwise leaves the occupants to see to their own affairs. Westwards, across the Moulton River, lies the Theatre District, home to rustic, urban artists and performers of all stripes. Crime is high there after dark, but accommodation is cheap, and the residents of the Theatre District are usually quick to defend their home's dignity. After all, they say, theatre is one of the few things that distinguishes true civilization from the lands of the barbarians. Take that claim how you will. Westwards again, across the Andoshen, brings you to sprawling, sawdust-choked Timberfell, a part of town utterly dominated by the Lumber Consortium. Little more than a criminal syndicate that scoured an ounce of legitimacy during the zeal of revolution, the Consortium was quick to purchase the entire ward during Almas's earliest days of independence and converted it into a home for its trademark product. The axe and the saw and the gavel of the Consortium justiciars all work in efficient harmony to squeeze profit from every twig and every leaf in the workshops of Timberfell. It is undeniably an important source of employment to the locals, but the influence of the Consortium reaches deep, even into the People's Council, and many scholars worry for its longevity if this lobbying is not addressed soon. Believe it or not, Almas is actually one of the Consortium's weaker areas, for it comes from the north of Andoran, where the darkwood trees grow thickest, and so I will speak more about its history and leadership when the tour reaches its home territory. For now, just be aware that Timberfell is essentially a privatized, corporate-run part of town. For now, let us conclude this tour by turning eastwards one more time to the northeasternmost ward of North End, informally called the University District. It is, unsurprisingly, the home of Almas University, a famous institution here in the Shining Kingdoms. The streets are strewn with ivy trees to offer shade to the many stressed students rushing hither and thither between classes, and the elegant buildings offer courses to every Andoran citizen, but not free of charge. Indeed, tuition is increasingly expensive and keeps attendance to Almas University beyond the means of most, and the People's Council often debates the merits of such an expensive state of affairs. For those lucky enough to enroll, however, courses in politics, philosophy, history, law, and recently zoology are available for study, all under the watchful eye of Provost Philandriel Morgatai, an elf wizard of incredible power. Ah, and here comes up here, right on time. I believe that finishes the river tour of Almas. I hope you have found it informative. I will be attending a performance at the famous playhouse Captive Audience this evening, and afterwards will retire to the tavern opposite its entrance. If you like, you may join me in some light carousing. There will always be time for more law, after all. Tomorrow we must depart Almas to continue our journey northwards, but in the meantime, enjoy the capital of the birthplace of freedom. See you tonight. Well, until then.